Welcome to Agency Bytes, a podcast for agency owners, hosted by agency veteran and coach Steve Guberman. Agency Bytes is a podcast focused on delivering actionable agency information from agency experts in about 25 minutes. Why 25 minutes? Because who has the attention span for much more these days? And you can squeeze in a listen between meetings with time for a bathroom break or coffee refill before your next meeting.
Thanks for tuning in. This is Bite-Sized Agency Briefs. I'm your host, Steve Guberman from Agency Outsight, where I coach agency owners to build the agency of their dreams. I'm really pumped to be joined by Nick Petroski from Promethean today. Nick runs a boutique consultancy that helps digital agencies grow more reliably with higher margins, simpler operations. Nick, we got the flannel, and if you're not on the video version of the podcast, jump on. We're matching uniforms today, so jump onto the video. Thanks for joining me, man.
Thanks for having me. And I appreciate the coordination on the outfits. That's, you're on a quality podcast when you show up and everything is seamless. And that's what this is.
Perfect. That's it. Nice. Why is it called, give us the backstory on Promethean. And I'm dying to know about the name also. I probably found that on your website, but
it's probably cool just to start with the name, right? Greek mythology, Prometheus stole fire from the gods and gave it to man, and fire was like the euphemism for knowledge. And so, in my overly hubris earlier days, I was like, I'm stealing fire, I'm stealing knowledge from everybody. I'm going to give it to the people. I'm going to spread this far and wide. So the name Prometheus just kind of my buddy's who I started the company with years ago, was a history major. So he had all this down, and we both like mythology and stuff. So it just kind of came out of that.
Dig it. And so essentially you guys do research for agencies. You do a lot of benchmarking. Like, where does that come from? Is that just a hobby that you're like, I'm going to turn this into a business?
Yeah. So the whole reason we got into this was really an accident. So me and him were friends from the Wall Street days. And so I did a ton of work. My job was basically to dissect industries and understand, what the trends are and not just what the trends are, but what the financial impacts were of those trends, all the way down to, net margin, EBITDA, and earnings per share for individual companies. So it was this really deep work in understanding everything from a super high level and narrowing it down to the impacts that it's going to have on the various players in that industry. And so when we left that and started Promethean, we had a few friends that had these challenges about getting research to make, any kind of data-backed decisions in their agencies. And back then, this was 2014, 2015, something like that. There just wasn't good data out there. There wasn't quality stuff that you could go out and say, hey, I want to know, here's a lead in. I want to know how much the average agency spends on marketing and sales. What percent of revenue is that? Am I spending enough? Am I spending too much? 10 years ago, you had no clue. You could talk to a few of your friends in the industry, but there was no way to get a really good idea of what the industry as a whole was doing. And so that's what, long story short, that's what Promethean turned into, was just solving that need for a few friends that we had. And then we were like, oh man, I guess this is something. This is needed out there. And the consulting then flowed right from the research. We pattern matched and understood what successful shops were doing. And that made it really easy from a strategic standpoint to say, hey, if you look similar to this and you want to look similar to that, do these similar things, and chances are pretty good you're going to get there.
Yeah. Trend matching. That's an interesting phrase. So you and I started chatting through Bureau of Digital. I love that group. Great people Absolutely. There. You match the DNA of great people there. But I stumbled upon a deck that you put out, and I forget somebody had shared it from another shop about Repeatable Revgen. And I had mentioned this to you. I was like, oh, let me check this out. It's probably a handful of slides. And 93 slides later, I was like, wow. I don't want to repeat 93 slides later, but I think there's so much magic to be had from any business, but an agency, marketing, digital, branding, whatever, to figure out their math to what is repeatable Revgen. And from your standpoint, researching side, how do you define that?
So we'll start with the problem and then walk into what the solution looks like. So the problem a lot of agencies face, and a lot of companies in general face, is they don't have a machine that is built to repeatedly generate new leads, take them through the funnel, convert them to sales, and then delight them through the value delivery process and turn them into basically evangelists for the brand. When I say it like that, it's like, well, duh, nobody has that. Like, that's a lot to do. That's a lot of work. But there are some that do. And the ones that do have that machine and they do have that figured out, they grow so much faster and easier, and they get to choose which projects they undertake, and they get to, there's more, I view these markets and operating in these industries as very much you can go with the flow of the industry and go with the flow of the river. And it's very easy to just kind of coast on down. And then there's some that will try to go against the flow, and they don't know what that flow looks like. And that machine is kind of like something that helps them go with the flow more easily. And it's something that came up from just me repeating myself so many times. I think I wrote the first draft I think I published it in 2019. And it just came from, this had been 5 or 6 years at that point of just going, okay, here's how you set up a sales structure. Here's how really like sales driven industries. I took a lot of this from how insurance sales, B2B insurance sales are set up. And it was fascinating to me because they sell the most boring product. It is the most like I can't think of a more mind-numbing thing. I had insurance classes in college, and I think I went to 2 classes. I just couldn't wrap my head around why anybody would want to have that conversation. And yet there are whole organizations, very successful groups of people that can sell the heck out of this stuff.
Yep.
And they do it in a way that is good for both client and business. And so a lot of that, I was like, well, if you can sell the most boring thing in the world through this structure, you got to be able to map this to digital agencies who are selling like some of the sexiest stuff in the world.
Yeah. Do you think there are industries that do have it dialed in? They've figured out that, top of funnel I love the way you talk about delight them through the service or the delivery of the product and then become evangelists. Like first that comes to mind is maybe the automotive industry. I mean, I feel like that's a pretty well-oiled automated machine, but maybe not. I don't know. Is there an industry you think has it dialed in?
I think that's a good example. I mean, they have a lot of structure in place. They have a lot of process in place. If I think about the last car I bought, though, I've been getting emails from Lincoln for the last 2 years now about ready to buy your next car. You want a Navigator now? It's like, no, I don't buy a new car every year. I don't know who does. So I think there's within any industry, obviously there's good players and bad players and players that have different strengths. One space that really kind of that I took a lot of inspiration other than insurance was SaaS and startup SaaS, enterprise specifically. Not just because I had a decent background in it, but because I feel like they have set up such a mathematical system to success in that space that I don't know. They seem to really have that dialed in. So a lot of this was also taken from how, if you think about the CRO position, Chief Revenue Officer, that's borrowed directly from how SaaS companies set that up.
So it's not necessarily about how do I get recurring revenue, like email marketing or turning things into like MMR, but it's more how do I keep this funnel fully packed with opportunities, and like you said, again, I love the phrase of it, just that delightful delivery, like servicing a client, delivering on the branding and the marketing, the strategy, the website, whatever that thing is. And then they become your evangelist. And that last part is key because as people move jobs, do they bring you with them? Do they recommend you, et cetera? But that top of funnel from unaware to opportunity, MQL, SQL, whatever stages people have, I mean, that's really what you're trying to dial in is getting people into the funnel and moving them from stage to stage.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the thing, is so much of this was born out of the issue that a lot of owners specifically, or partners at agencies, have to jump in and like save sales. Like you get this cycle where it's just a roller coaster of, oh, okay, I got to jump in and save sales. So now our leads are high because I've been hitting my network. I've been sending emails. I've been having coffee. And then it's like, oh no, I'm busy. I have to jump into production. I have to hire. I have to staff up. And then leads drop off. And it's just this constant cycle. And if you can smooth that out and you can pull that owner onto more strategic stuff and bigger problems than Revgen, it frees them up mentally. It frees up the amount of morale. Like, it improves the morale of the agency. Everybody's not fighting fires all the time. You can solve bigger problems. And it's just, I don't know. It goes, like I said, that whole gamut. It goes from somebody being a stranger to somebody being an evangelist. And that machine, that sales machine, whatever it looks like that you build, should take them all the way through that whole process and support them through the thing.
Do you think, and I know team members, salesperson, owner, et cetera, is a big part of it. Do you think that's like the key, I'll say the keystone move that an agency needs to do, is get the agency out of the practitioner role and more into biz dev leadership role? Or does that create further problems because now they are the key breadwinner for the agency?
You're talking about like having a salesperson running a lot of the Revgen?
Yeah. Or versus the owner. Yeah. I mean, what's your formula there?
I think it's a gradual step out from the owner's perspective. So when I look at this and when I look at building this for clients, it's something where you don't flip a switch and all of a sudden say, all right, you're the head salesman, you're in charge of 100% of Revgen. Go crush it, go do your thing, make magic. It's really owner does, I don't know, say 20% of their time spent on lead gen, like very top of funnel stuff, having those meetings. How do we reduce that to 5% and only on really key accounts? So you slowly push that kind of work into, an SDR or a BDR or, whatever, or a marketing-led growth, whatever your motion looks like, you slowly transition that to them. And then you don't have one person running point on that's, purely responsible for all your agency's Revgen. Like you just don't. By the time you've moved that out of the owner's like pool of responsibilities, you should have a few people handling, multiple portions of that process.
So you're talking what size agencies moving into that, thinking of the growth of an agency? So
this kind of stuff doesn't start until around 25 employees, maybe 20 employees.
Okay. So they're above 5 million in top line revenue.
Yeah. There's some parameters I put in the document, like a little bit of a prerequisite kind of thing where, you need to have like at least 150K per FTE. Your billing, your pricing needs to be solid and dialed in. Your positioning needs to be good. Your overall strategy for the agency needs to be a growth one. There's definitely some stuff you need to have in place. You wouldn't want to start this in a smaller agency, even if you could, because so much of that process is the owner and the leaders of that agency learning how this sales thing works. And then they can know later on if it's broken. And they can also know what are those key pain points? What are those value drivers? What's the thing you're actually solving for your clients? And this is where they learn that.
Yeah. So can you walk through like what this system looks like and, how does it work?
Yeah, absolutely. So you split it into, you think about this in four kind of like roles, 4 areas. First is biz dev. And when I say biz dev, I mean actual partnership generating biz dev, not sales masquerading as biz dev because somebody didn't like the name sales. Just focusing on partnerships. That's something that, layers in probably around the 50 FTE mark. I wouldn't push it much earlier because it is such a slow kind of RevGen line from actually doing the activity to getting revenue generated from it, from the partnership. Sure. Next up, you have sales, which is just what it says. It is walking someone, a prospect, marketing qualified lead, or sales qualified lead through close and then handing them off to account management. So account management's the next piece. That's managing the relationship while they are a client. And that's where that, second half of delight comes in. So you have your value delivery and your PMs that do a really good job. And then you have your account managers that say, hey, this kind of stuff surfaced in the during the project. We could add extra value to you. Would that be something you'd be interested in? It lets you grow the account. It lets you grow the relationship. It lets you be more valuable to them. And then kind of supporting all of that is really the marketing piece. Marketing should be a force multiplier for everything else you do. It should make every one of those conversations easier because you have people in marketing thinking about, how do I communicate the value that I'm presenting at each stage? And how do I effectively do that?
Internal people, you mean?
Yes.
Yeah. So the widest net of all of that is that first stage and getting either unaware or even aware people into the top of that funnel. Does this system that you talk about kind of give that holy grail of, what are we doing to get people into that funnel? Or is that also the final stage, that marketing end of it? I mean, it is cyclical there.
Yeah. So when I think about the structure of this and questions like that of what activities do you undertake, I separate them a little bit. So this structure and this group of people, someone in biz dev, marketing, sales, and account management, just put one person in each of those for the sake of argument. Those four people should be able to run whatever strategy and whatever tactics that you want to implement on the at various stages of the client's life cycle. So if you're talking about strategies on how to does this work for generating top of funnel activity, I go through that, like the various strategies that you can take. I go through account-based marketing, content, thought leadership kind of stuff, cold outreach, and then I kind of look at them through the lens of, how expensive is it to implement this kind of strategy? And these are very general. I didn't put numbers on these purposefully, because you can do different implementations of these at different levels and have varying levels of success. Once you start getting into that crafting of growth strategy, that can get really customized really fast. And it should, frankly. There's not a one size fit all thing for that.
So what's an example of you're saying it can get bloated both in manpower and financial investment? What's an example of that?
Of getting bloated?
You should watch out for. Yeah, you're saying it can get, yeah.
Yeah, it's really easy to overspend when you're not tracking a lot of metrics and you're not holding either, internally or a vendor to certain metrics. I touch on that a little bit. I gave a suite of kind of metrics that each area should and could track as a kind of a baseline to understand how well they're doing in this RevGen system. When any of that is either not tracked or it's allowed to get out of line, the spend can just spiral. And I've seen it multiple times where it creates so much frustration because no one's getting the results that they want, and they're still throwing money at it because that's just how they've done it. For example, I've seen a lot. You asked for a specific one. I'll give you one. A lot of shops I've seen try outsourced lead gen, where they will get somebody to either make calls or emails or both, send faxes.
Book appointments for me, basically, right?
Book appointments. Yeah. And they will spend significant money with some of these. At the low end, I've seen anything from $5 to $10K a month on a 3 to 6 month contract. And at the high end, I don't think there's a cap on it. I've also seen incredibly limited success from these. You have to be a very specific kind of agency targeting a very specific market for this to work. and when I see it specifically in the enterprise B2B space, like a lot of the agencies that I work with are like, we want to talk to the Fortune 500. We want to work with all of them.
Sure.
You're not going to get a meeting with a Fortune 500 exec through a meeting setting service. Like, it's just, we should be realistic here. But that's one that I've seen is just a colossal waste of money.
Yeah. What are some of the, I guess, I don't even like using the KPI, maybe OKR. I don't know what you would call it, but metrics that agencies should be looking for as they're trying to put like repeatable Revgen systems in place as far as daily activities, weekly activities, monthly activities, things like that?
Yeah, it really will depend on what you're doing. So what your overall strategy is, and I know that kind of sucks as an answer, but like if you look at like top line, you want to understand what your average client value is, what the lifetime value looks like. That's a pretty good one, I would say, if we're talking about a few North Star metrics. I would look at that. I would look at what your number of new client ads is nice, but I wouldn't say it's super necessary. Like most shops that I've seen and surveyed only add maybe a client a month. Again, they're in the mid-market and enterprise B2B space, so that's enough for them to grow. Yeah. But I wouldn't necessarily go with that. You do want to have some idea of how much it costs you to acquire a new client. Obviously all the funnel metrics. So if you're grading marketing, you want to make sure that the top of funnel is actually getting activity. You want to make sure that the conversion rates through your funnel steps, whatever they are actually decent and improving. Same with sales. Like as your BDR, SDR team and account executives move them through to close, you want to make sure that nothing's fallen off in a weird spot. No one's dropping the ball on proposals or something like that. Good one for I see some opportunity in account management where a lot of times it's just make them feel good, make them have a good time. There's definitely like renewal rates, how many times they come back and talk to you, the account growth, what kind of churn rate you're seeing, referral rates, and a whole thing around referrals. Like being able to build out a referral strategy, it can be really powerful, but it has to be intentional. And so if you build in your metrics and your stuff around that, like where did referrals come from? What's the average size of a referral? All that kind of stuff. Like that's how you grade account management to be successful.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, and there's a zillion podcasts on this from a zillion different, agency coaches, strategists, researchers that if you ask any agency, most of them will say, so much of our business, X% of our business came from referrals and word of mouth. But you can't plan strategic growth on that. And so how do you double down on that? Well, like you said, look where it came from, find what the opportunities are, and then how do you ask for those referrals and things like that. But what you're talking about from this system standpoint is so much more than that. But account management and account growth, there's got to be metrics there as far as how are we growing this account, not just maintaining it. So, I don't think there's definitely not a one size fits all. There's not one metric or even a handful of metrics because things are constantly moving, based on external factors, internal factors. So things are always being redialed in and adjusted. That formulation of things is also kind of a part of what the system is that you're putting in place. Yeah,
absolutely. Like this whole thing is really a skeleton to be customized exactly to a specific agency. What I tried to do, and the reason that it's so damn long, is I tried to kind of give as much of that skeleton as possible and show as many like branching spaces that you could go off into. But even this, like running through this, I'm like, man, I could write a whole other guide on like certain sections of this. I don't know if anybody would want to read it, but I keep looking at it. I'm like, man, maybe I should write that.
There's a book in your future about repeatable Revgen, Nick.
No, there isn't. I'm not going to write a book. No, thank you. Leave that to better. What's up?
I want to wind it down just so we can stay on track with timing.
Yeah.
Just random couple shot fire questions for you. So not related to work, maybe related to work, whatever you want it to be. What's the latest new hobby, book, podcast, something you're binging and you're into these days?
Yeah. So we talked a little offline, but big into woodworking for a couple of years now. And I have a garden trellis project that I'm putting together. It's currently taking over my entire shop. I'm a big fan of doing something with my hands and doing creating something tangible. I feel like it helps kind of mellow out my brain every now and then. It's kind of necessary, but I'd say that.
Love that.
Maybe some hiking.
There you go. Yeah. Get lost in the woods out there in Ohio. What, again, personal or professional, and it could be digital or in the physical realm. What's a new tool that you recently integrated into your life that you're like, how did I live without this thing before?
Ooh, that's interesting. It's going to be kind of a goofy answer, but it's a tool that keeps coming back into my life. I'm very hardcore ADHD, so I will try every project management tool out there to try to tame that. Post-it notes. They're the simplest damn thing, and they work beautifully. And they've come in and out of my life, and they're currently in. So Post-it notes are in. You heard it here first. Awesome.
Bring them back. And then finally, what's the most valuable piece of business advice you can offer to any listener that's tuned in?
I would say be really methodical, related to all this, be really methodical about building out a system for Revgen that works for you. And that's something that can, be repeatable, something that can take some stress off of your plate. Running a business shouldn't be as hard as it is. And I think one of the big reasons it is hard is because of the Revgen challenges.
Yeah. Awesome. Nick, I appreciate your time. Thank you for joining me and imparting your wisdom on my listeners.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me. This was a lot of fun.
Awesome. Thanks.
Thanks again for tuning in to Agency Bytes. Leave a 5-star rating and a thoughtful review if you liked what you learned. If you didn't, DM me and tell me how I can make the show better. I respond to every single message and I value feedback.